Hi everyone, thank you for coming. This is a live webinar, Return to the New Normal, Leaders Top of Mind. We're just going to wait for a few minutes while people are still joining. So while we're waiting for people to join, we'd love it if you could answer this question in just a few words in the chat tab as a way to start the debate. We'll be reading your responses for the next 2 minutes or so. So if you could just find the chat tab and answer this, this question there, so we can see what this looks like for you, what you think the new normal is going to look like for you. Hi there, if you've just joined us, we're giving people a few minutes, few more minutes to join. And while we're waiting, we'd love it if you could answer this question in the chat tab as a way to start the debate. Please just use a few words and I'll be summarizing that before we start. Okay, this is your last chance to write in the chat what your response to this question would be to start the debate. What do you think the new normal is going to look like for you? And then we'll start the webinar. Okay, so welcome to this live webinar. We are also recording it to share afterwards with you and with anyone not able to join. We are here today with our experts, Oseas Ramirez, Corporate Innovation Advisor and keynote speaker to Fortune 500 companies, startup founder and board member in several organizations, and Thierry de Beyssac, business cultural transformation expert and former CEO in 12 countries. Here today, we will explore and debate global organizations' leaders' top of mind topics and how they're getting ready for this new phase. We will host a Q&A at the end of the session. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can write them to us in the questions tab and we'll answer questions at the end of the webinar. Please don't use the chat tab now to ask questions as they can sometimes get lost there. So over to you, Thierry. What do you think the new normal is going to look like?
Oh, great question, actually. Thank you, Becky. First, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It's a bit frustrating not to be able to see you on your videos, but I will manage that. So back to your question, Becky. Every time we ask this question to people, we see that the new normal is a kind of buzzword that is covering very different meanings. It goes from the typical normal as before to a significant different future for people and organizations. So even some people call it back to the future instead of new normal. And what does that mean? It means that we have to revisit the future we had 3 months ago, 6 months ago for 2020, obviously, but probably also for the next 3 years. And this is right both for organizations, companies, governments, countries, cities, but also individuals. Okay, so bottom line, the new normal for me has different meanings, different companies, different new normals to come. And I don't think that the new normal will be for everybody soon, unfortunately. It will be for some countries, it will be for some organizations, but not for everybody. And I see a spectrum, of new normal. At the extreme right, for example, you might have all those companies, industries that are already dealing very positively with the crisis. It could be, IT firms that are offering remote working solutions, and companies in the essential goods and services industries, such as the food industry, some of the pharma industries, some of the retail industries. And those companies are already building the new normal, okay? And they have some very specific challenges and opportunities that we will see probably later. At the other extreme of the spectrum, what I would see is all those companies, individuals, countries that are close to kind of, Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They are in the survival mode, and they are dealing with probably as a next step, which will not be a new normal, a huge restructuring of their business, including significant people layoffs. We are talking about 10 to 15 million unemployed people more in the US, 7 to 10 in Europe. And all of this is going to generate within the organization and our societies unconscious organization traumas, similar to the post-traumatic stress disorder that we have both for individual but also for organization, and also the survival syndrome for those who are going to be and remain in the companies. So often those unconscious traumas, organizational traumas, prevent your people, your managers and your employees to cope with new responsibilities, to strive to extra mile efforts, to new learnings, and exactly when you're going to need them for that. Okay, so this is the spectrum of new normals that I can see, and in between you have all kinds of companies who are dealing with their new future. And once again, this applies not only to companies, it does apply also to countries, cities, and individuals. There is much more to say about that, but Oseas, how do you perceive and how do you see this new normal?
Hey, Thierry, it's great to see you and to be here with you, even if it's virtually. And well, first of all, I echo everything you said, and I love how you're connecting it with experiences we're having with some of our customers right now. But I would like to build on what you said by tackling the question from a slightly different angle. So, Becky, I don't know if you can share the slide that I sent to you. But essentially, I was looking up some information on the new normal and what we understand, and I was just going through HBR in this case. I literally typed new normal and see what popped up, and you'll see a bunch of articles here. But I ask everybody here in the webinar, just take a look here at these articles and tell me if there's anything that seems off to you. I'll give you a couple seconds. Now, I'm sure many of you have started noticing that one thing that is off, at least in the context of what we're talking about today, and Becky, we can move to the next slide, is that many of these articles that talk about the new normal are from years ago, 2013, 2012, and 2012. And if you keep on scrolling down, there's more and more and more into the back. Thanks, Becky. So the point that I'm trying to highlight here is that this idea of a new normal is not something new. If anything, and the first idea I would like to share regarding this is that if we think of the new normal as a new quote unquote stable phase, like when will we have another stable moment, I would actually challenge that and say, well, we haven't had that for a long time, and I don't think we're ever going to have it again. So that would be my first answering of the new normal would be probably what it is not going to be. There's a good term that encapsulates it that is so overutilized now that is beyond cliche, whatever that is, but this idea of VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, which was essentially a term that popularized by the military. and then started getting utilized in the business world. The fact that it is overutilized doesn't make it any less true. And those 4 components are not going anywhere. So new normal as a new stable phase, I would challenge that. I'm not saying that that's what we're implying, but I think sometimes it helps defining what something is by looking at what it's not. The second aspect is I don't think the new normal is properly a stage. I think it's something we're going to get there through a series of phases or transitional stages. So for example, right now we are in whatever status we are right now. It's a combination of remote work and collaboration, decreased travel, increased sanitary norms, and all sorts of challenges. I do think we will change into something different, which I would not call a new normal, but I would call it maybe a next phase of decreased level of COVID-19 concern. Maybe that'll be a result of a combination of the vaccine and or proper treatment and or some degrees of herd immunity, but it'll just be that it's less of a concern. Now, how are things going to look like then? There's obviously more unknowns than knowns, but one of the few things that I'm absolutely certain we'll have is, again, we will still need, and I'm going to talk about organizations, the need for agility, the ability to adapt, to transform, all of those things that, again, by now are cliches. We just had a crash course, a boot camp in experientially living why those things matter more than ever, and I think that's going to remain there. Which takes me to the third point, which I just want to flash very briefly. Becky, if you can share this other slide that I sent to you. This is also something that by now I'm sure everybody has seen, but it is it comes from I think a CV Insights publication. They sent this as a questionnaire, right? And who led the digital transformation in your company? And it's not the C-suite, it's COVID-19. Now, thank you, Becky. It's meant to be a joke, but there's actually a lot of truth in it if you consider that COVID-19 has driven or accelerated innovation and digitization in many projects in which we were dragging our feet. So I do think that part of the new normal might be bringing some of that momentum into whatever the next phases look like. So with that said, Thierry, that kind of makes another question pop up in my head, which would be, if we're moving into the this next phase or transition of stages, what challenges and opportunities do you see in this new moment?
I see many. I like to see a cartoon that I think would conclude very well what you said, Becky, if you can put this cartoon. It's this one. Basically, what we just said is, don't expect to receive a new normal. And look at this cartoon. It tells you exactly what you might think about. Which one do we want? And you will have to deal with your specific industry issues, with your specific organization issue, with your personal issues. And in front of that, you will see that there will be several new normals that you will have to work on. And you will have to select the one you want to build. And we say new normal, we can say the new future, whatever it will be. So back to your point, and building on what you just said, Oseas, with the example of digitization, what I see as an opportunity, as challenges, is what I would call the power of the burning platform effect. People, you talk about VUCA. Today, it's not anymore a cliche. It's not even anymore a concept. I think there are 7 billion people on Earth who do know what VUCA means, what vulnerability is, uncertainty is, what complexity is, what ambiguity is, because they live it. They live it in their body, in their mind, in their heart. And I think that this crisis, from the 40 years of experience I have, is probably the most impressive catalyst change that I've seen. And what have we seen? We have seen many people, many organizations that are demonstrating an amazing resilience. We have seen people doing in one day what they would have done in the past in 1 month. We have seen people doing in 1 week what they would have done or what we would have done in 3 months. And over the past 3 months, many people, many organizations, and not only companies, have done in 3 months what we have never done. And this is the power of the burning platform. So there is a $1 trillion question here. Is those people, those organizations, those countries, those associations, whatever, those teachers, but let's stick to the companies, will they go back to their old way of doing business? Will they go back to their old way of developing their talent to get the best from their people? And by doing so, would they let behind them the unbelievable lessons, the treasures we learned and we are learning from this crisis? you know, many CEOs told us when we talked with them is, how could we say no, that we cannot be faster, super agile, innovative? We just proved we can. We just proved we did it. So we can't go back. There is no way we can go back. So the question is, right, but you did that under a burning platform and in a specific way that is probably not sustainable. So the big question is, how can you replicate it in a sustainable new way, new normal way, I would say. So I'm going to steal one of your favorite sentences, Oseas. Never let a good crisis go to waste. I'm sorry for that, but you will use it. I love it. I'm sorry. Back to those organizations, cities, countries, communities who are already building their new normal to change their old future by a new one. I think they have a unique imperative and responsibility to shape also a new culture. Why am I saying that? Because, you know, we are changing culture, we are transforming culture. It takes us 3 years, 4 years to really have a huge impact. We can have a first impact year one, but it takes at least 2 years in a normal way, in the old normal way, I would say. And we see that today, if we take advantage and leverage what we are learning from this crisis, we can do it in 3 months. We can do it in 6 months. No doubt about that. We just need to learn, what have we done? What did work and what didn't work? How can we replicate that once again? And use the same kind of energy, focus, sense of urgency, resilience, agility, and innovation. All of this that we saw in our reality of today. So I'm gonna ask you the same question, Oseas, but it would be great if we could have another cartoon. I love the next cartoon you're gonna see actually, because it tells everything. Yeah, I love this one. You know, because I'm afraid that this will be our reality, meaning there will be some organization that will invent or take the wheels. But I'm afraid that there will be several organizations, people, whatever, who will be either too busy with business as usual, or they will not have the capex they think to make this kind of investment. So, Oseas, what do you see as a challenge or opportunity in that context? Thank you, Becky, for the cartoon.
I love that cartoon. I had seen it in many other circumstances, and I think it allows us to connect many things to it. Usually what it brings to mind, for example, when I had the opportunity of working with a C-suite team and we're talking about innovation and agility, etc., everybody plays lip service to it, like, yeah, this is a good thing, but we have these other things to do that are more important. Now, interestingly enough, as we think about the challenges and opportunities in this crisis, I think that we all had the experience of how an interruption disrupts the momentum. So we were doing whatever we were doing, and then suddenly we had to stop and make a change. And one thing that I think is a good opportunity to think about is that when we suffer these type of interruptions or changes, it affords us the opportunity to reset and redesign what is it that we were doing to some extent or to a great extent. It gives us the opportunity to ask ourselves, well, if there is going to be a new normal, do we just want to go back to what we were doing? And what I'm hearing from a lot of business leaders at a business level and an individual level is, well, this has been rough, but I do not necessarily want to go back exactly to where we were and to what we were planning to do before. Like, this has given me a different lens. So it's going to be interesting because we can look at it at different levels. At the macro level, you know, entire nations are right now asking ourselves, well, do we have the right protections in the healthcare system? Is it okay to govern this way, et cetera? So that's at a very macro level. At an organizational level, many companies are thinking, well, how do we make our supply chains less vulnerable to disruption? How do we improve our IT infrastructure to allow for better remote collaboration? How do we accelerate our digitization initiatives? So we're being forced into thinking about these things. But even deeper at an individual level, and going back to the phrase you mentioned earlier, which I recently found out it was attributable to Churchill, never let a good crisis go to waste. The crisis is here. It means different things for different of us. Like, for some of us, it's been just the inconvenience of working remotely. And for some, it has been the single most challenging event they'll face in their lifetime, with the death of loved ones, losing your job, and then everything in between. So the crisis doesn't mean the same thing for everybody. But when I see something as complex and that can deeply affect us as this, I go back to Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And this idea of how the last of our freedoms, the one that nobody can take away, nothing can take away. It's choosing our own attitude in facing circumstances. So again, I know that people have gone through tremendous hardships, and I don't want to get on the moral high ground and say, well, you could choose better. That's not the point. But I do think it helps to look at somebody who was living in a concentration camp, and as a result of that experience, say, even in a concentration camp, I can still choose what is it that I want my attitude to be. So I guess in short, I think that disruption is a fantastic window of opportunity to redesign ourselves and concretely review our mindsets and our corresponding habits. This phrase, I think it's something that is very fitting now. Watch your thoughts because they become your words. Watch your words because they become your actions. Your actions becomes your habits, your character, and then into your destiny. This is a very good moment to watch your thoughts. That's probably what I would get out of this.
Actually, I would have a question for you, following your point. What you just said. What do you think would be the implication of this new normal, or whatever will be the buzzword for that, at a leader's personal level?
That's a good one, because I think it's probably one of the dimensions that gets more easily neglected in the middle of a crisis, right? I've been working with different groups in different countries recently, and one thing that I started doing is I run a poll in which I ask them, how would you rate yourself in certain areas of your life before the pandemic? So nutrition, workout, sleep habits, and we usually get a mixed bag. Some people say I was very good, neutral, or probably very bad. And then I ask them as a follow-up question, how has that changed now that we're in a lockdown phase? And interestingly enough, I've seen roughly 50% of people who respond kind of switch places. People that were doing very good according to their own self-rating in nutrition, in sleep, etc., now move into not doing so good. And some people that were not doing very good have now improved. Now, this makes me very curious. I would like to research in more depth into that to understand what's going on. But definitely, circumstances have affected every single person. I don't think there's anybody who has not had some form of impact with this situation. However, I do think that what I just described is a good example of facing a comparable set of circumstances. Again, everybody's life is different. Some people have utilized this or utilized it to catapult themselves into positive change in areas that have to do with self-care, whereas some others have receded, right? Now, probably the most important takeaway for me in terms of this when it comes to leaders is this. I understand, and we've both been CEOs, Thierry, and that sometimes the demands are crazy, and then there's certain times in which there doesn't seem to be any other option than just white knuckling it and going through it. However, I do think that an area that is neglected is the same way that when you're a professional manager or a leader, you are expected to know the ABCs. You need to know your finance, you need to know your management, you need to know certain things that if you don't know, you cannot be an effective leader. I have not seen a comparable demand or a comparable expectation in professionalizing our self-care. And I do think that if we're professionals in being able to do the finance, the management, the innovation, the stakeholder management, the talking to the board, if we're expected to be professionals in all those aspects, I do think there should be also an underlying expectation that we're professionals in taking care of ourselves. And I'll just give you a couple of examples to tell you what I mean by this. If you look at Matthew Walker's work, he's a researcher at UC Berkeley, and he's a sleep specialist. He throws some nuggets that are interesting. For example, he says that days after a supervisor has slept poorly, his direct reports themselves have decreased engagement in their jobs because of the impact of sleep deprivation in their manager. Unproductive employees generate fewer and less accurate solutions to problems, and short amounts of less sleep predict both a lower work rate and lower completion speed of basic tasks. So if you don't sleep well, that has an impact cognitively. In terms of diet, a bad diet is associated with reduced global cognitive function, cognitive decline eventually, and so on and so forth. So my point is, we have these levers, sleep, nutrition, attention management, that have a tremendous impact on our ability to perform as professionals. So I think we should be able to do those professionally, taking care of ourselves, because whatever we do or don't do to ourselves as leaders trickles down into the organization and has a very significant impact. What has been your experience on this space, both as a CEO and also supporting executives?
Yeah, actually, as a coach, I'm afraid I will have to learn from you how to make my CEOs or my coaches athletes, because this is what you are telling us. And I love the point, that you're mentioning, that as a leader in the current situation, taking care of yourself, your sleep, your nutrition, and your physical and mental health is part of your job. I mean, it's part of your responsibility. Actually, it's part of, if I may play with this in English, it's part of your responsibility, your ability to respond to the current context. So don't neglect it. And actually, at Axialent, we have these 3 pillars of the sustainable success. And we have been telling for years to our clients, do not underestimate that the sustainable success is based on 3 things. Number 1, the results, your PPS might be your EBITDA, your growth, your market share, your brand reputation, whatever. It's the community of the stakeholders interacting and collaborating with trust, respect, and so on and so forth. And the stakeholders are now really a broad community. And the high, myself, each of us, myself. And to say the truth, what we have seen is if there is one dimension that has been sacrificed or underestimated so far, it's this one, the high. And I think that once again, the COVID-19, a bit like digitization, just revealed us, hey, wait a minute, if you don't sleep, if I don't sleep, if I don't in a great health, both physically and mentally, there is nothing I will do with this crisis, okay? And this is true not only for leaders, to tell the truth, but for the leaders, it's a responsibility. So I don't want to insist too much on this because you said it very well. I would like to insist on the other part of the I. Beyond the mental and psychological and physical health, there is the learning I, the innovation project that is myself. And we can see it. I mean, I don't know how many things I had to learn the past 3 months just to be here and commenting this kind of webinar. And the point is, it's also your responsibility today to invest in yourself as a learner, as a permanent student. You have to face a permanent VUCA environment, and we have to do so. So grow your ability as a change leader, as a change agent, and as a coaching leader, because this is the only way we will be able to manage this kind of environment. So invest at least half a day, if not a full day, every week at learning new stuff, at learning whatever you have to, and take the time for it. And don't do like the cartoon. We are too busy for that. No, you will be out of the game because of that. Just learn how to make change, stretching, but not stressing, not frightening for yourself and for the others. That will be my my input. I don't know if you want to add something like that. We have a cartoon for that, Becky.
Well, it comes up. I do want to pull on a thread from something you just mentioned, but so tell us about the cartoon, and then I want to get back to that.
Oh, the apple is the food, okay, and the books are the learner that we were talking about. So go ahead, please.
Perfect. So just pulling on something, you mentioned this idea of us being innovation projects. As we know, this is a phrase that we originally heard from our friend Raf Biton, and I love it. He says, "I am an innovation project." And when I first heard that, I was like, that is very powerful. Now, Raf is also a world-renowned innovation expert, book author, etc. And we've worked on a lot of projects together in Axialent. He's a great friend. And when having exchanges around that series of ideas, one of the things that we were discussing is how could we apply some of those innovation principles that we've worked with organizations to ourselves. So that is an entire area of work, as you know now, is one of our areas of practice at Axialent. But I guess for everybody listening here today, one way in which I would invite you to consider this being a learner every day, as you just mentioned, Thierry, is this idea of treating yourself like an innovation project, which has some very specific things we can get to. As a matter of fact, I'll be soon participating in a webinar to talk about personal experimentation as a source of habit formation. So what I'm trying to get at here is, I'm not saying go and test stuff, which is good, but it's not rigorous enough. So what I'm inviting everybody here is to consider what personal experimentation really means. There's a science, there is a discipline, there's a method to the madness in which you consistently be testing things in yourself to see what works and what allows you to be better, to live a better life. So I guess I'm just trying to echo that idea that you just mentioned of being a learner, and I think one way of embodying it is this experimentation mindset in which we're continuously testing things in ourselves and seeing what works.
Thank you so much. So maybe it's time to give open the forum and the conversation to questions. And I know that Becky, very talented, managed to summarize what we shared with you with some takeaways. So with the three main questions we ask, how do we see the new normal? What does that mean? And the other one is what kind of challenges and opportunities, which is the second. And the third one is what we just said about, on a personal level, what does it mean for leaders, And yeah, because I think we have exchanged a lot of stuff. It's good to summarize it. Thank you so much, Becky. And this is time for question and answers.
Perfect.
So, Becky, if you want to kick off this process, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And thank you everyone for your responses at the beginning as well. It was really interesting hearing, reading in there what you were writing. I saw a lot around more online and remote work being done, a lot around the acceleration of digital innovation, learning new behaviors, needing to be more flexible and open to differences, the challenge in that too. So thanks, that was really interesting to see all that.
Would it be possible, Becky, would it be possible to share that after the webinar with all the participants?
Yes.
It would be great.
We'll be sharing the recording as well. Yeah.
Good.
Perfect.
So we've had some great questions so far. So I'm going to kick this off with one for Oseas. Do you think that companies that had a solid culture of traits such as agility, innovation capabilities have been better equipped to face the current crisis?
The immediate answer is yes. I do think that having those traits deeply ingrained in your organization puts you in a much better position to respond. Why? If it is already part of your DNA, let me not use a cliche word. If you actually have boiled this down to processes and how you run business, because here's a distinction that I like to establish. Since it became popular to say that you're innovative, you're agile, etc., I think I see 9 out of every 10 organizations embrace that verbally, but they don't change anything. So yes, we're agile, we're innovative, but the underlying processes and systems don't change at all. So I'll just give you an example and get back to the main idea. One of the questions I ask always a couple of questions to organizations when they say, "Oh, we're undergoing through the agile transformation, we're moving a lot quicker." I ask them things such as, how frequent are your strategic planning cycles? Oh, we do this once a year. All right, very agile. How about your performance management reviews? Once a year. Okay. How long does it take to register as a vendor? 4 months. All right, well, that's just reeking speed and agility and adaptability all over the place. I know that these concepts go much, much more beyond that, but what I'm trying to get at is that we can have pockets inside of the organizations where we say we embrace agility because we have a team that does software development with agile practices, or because everybody's standing up in the meetings now and we call them Scrum meetings or whatever. So it's very easy to put a superficial layer of agility or lean, whatever, by just peppering some language here and there, without really making profound changes. And you can see when a change has deeply been ingrained in an organization, when it is reflected in those systems that nobody wants to mess with, like performance management, like compensation, and some other aspects. So with that said, going back to the original question, I would say that organizations that have deeply ingrained those traits are in much better shape. However, those that have done so only superficially, I don't think we're in any better shape than an organization that has not even read about them to face this crisis.
Yeah, really interesting. Thanks. Did you want to add something to that, Thierry?
No, I think Oseas said it very well. This is what we see already. So no more comments.
Okay, thanks. So moving on then to another one from one of our participants. What are the new leadership skills that you think will be needed in this new normal? And he says here that he believes that many values have changed during the social isolation. Thierry?
Yeah, that's a big question. The number one is leaders will need to understand that their role was already, but more than ever and faster than ever, is not anymore to say and to tell people what they have to do and how they have to do it, and to support them in doing it and to control them in doing it. So I would say for the number one, probably ability or skill, more than the skill, ability they need to develop is what I said. They must be change experts. I'm not saying change agents, I'm not saying change leaders, change experts. They need to know everything about how to make change happen. They need to know all those details. And the other probably skill, that the meta skill, is probably to move from a kind of command and control kind of leadership culture, which is less and less so the case in many companies, but still, toward a mentoring, coaching, leadership strategy. It is a business strategy, more than including a culture, but also business strategy. What does that mean? It means that you need to empower your people. That's based on empowerment, obviously, and that's not an easy one. You need to empower people with accountability, which is very good. It goes together, and it's not that easy. And you need to structurally, in your organization, in your behavior, in your way of thinking, in your way of working, and in your way of interacting with your people, to delegate the decisions to the closest point of action in the company. And that's a big one. Oseas was mentioning to be agile, to be innovative. How long does it take you to make this decision, or to get this information, or to implement this action? I mean, should you delegate it to the point, the closest point of action in your company, you can be sure that you will get it. If not, you will not get it. So obviously we say the player learner mindset, we talk about that, but I would insist on change experts and coaching leader. That's a big change. I don't know, Oseas, if you want to
maybe just
comment.
again, just maybe double clicking on something you just mentioned. How do we allow decisions to be made by those that are closer to the situation? That is something that is, I guess, now become an integral part of any agile transformation. Which is, how do you give teams more autonomy, right? This idea of the top-down structure, from where all the wisdom and all the good decisions emanate and then just trickle down. I think that actually worked for environments in which we had a greater degree of certainty and predictability. So then it kind of makes sense that you do very thorough, rigorous planning, and then you just execute the plan. However, we started seeing in all types of organizations that doesn't quite work. So, for example, the military, war is one of those things that we would not like to see any of, but it does happen. And for example, the US military has now, through some of its leaders who have retired, documented some of the changes and lessons that they learned in fighting a different types of war, for example, in Afghanistan, where they realized that the usual traditional, chain of command, as it had been applied for centuries, did not quite work as effectively in the type of situations that they were looking at. And they started shifting more into giving autonomy to the teams. So there's still a chain of command, but now what trickles down is the leader's intent. And then there's some more latitude for decisions to be made on the field, because you don't know what you're facing and you cannot just go relaying back information. So in a large organization, similar thing. If you're facing a very crowded environment, we see with some of our clients that have, multinationals, and then they have a headquarters, usually from the place from which all good products and services ideas come from. And then they realize, like, our headquarters in so-and-so part in the US told us that this is the best product, but it seems that people in Brazil don't quite agree. And they're not buying our product, they're buying our competitors. And what do you need to do? To go back to the headquarters, 7 management levers up. Hey, we need to change this. No, because it needs to be the same for everybody. And then it goes down. And that going back and forth makes you super slow. So many organizations are saying, well, we need to empower our teams, whether it is those that are in closest contact with the customer, those that have physical presence in certain geographical areas, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How do we empower them to scan the environment for what's going on and make those changes quicker? So I do think that going back to your question, what are some of the new skills that leaders need to have? I think it's expressing their leadership intent clearly, and then letting go and trusting your teams.
Yeah, I would add to your point something that could seem strange. Probably a new skill for many leaders is entrepreneurship. And you would say, hey, wait a minute. Who is not, as a top leader in the executive committee, not an entrepreneur? Most of them. No, they have a different logic. In some companies, you have only entrepreneurs in the executive committee, but this is extremely rare. And they are often the founders of the company, okay? Why am I saying that? It's because what we are asking to the teams, Oseas was mentioning, is more or less to act as intrapreneurs or entrepreneurs, okay? And the point is, let's make sure that the executive committee is not slowing them down, is not, with some bureaucracy, preventing them to be that agile, that innovative, and that fast decision makers.
Really interesting. Thanks, Thierry. Thanks, Oseas. I have another question here. So related to one that I think we just asked is, do you think that we need better skills than before? Or do you think that we just need to have a richer context to apply the same skills that we always had to have?
I think it's pretty much redundant with what we said. They are new skills. The skills we were talking about, they are not completely new. I mean, nothing is completely new from that. But, you know, once again, being a change expert is a different thing. Being a coaching leader is a different thing. Putting in place a new governance model requires completely different mindsets and behaviors. So maybe the response to this question is, you know, before thinking about the skill itself, before thinking about the behavior itself, here I will use, you know, our approach, which is, you know, if you want to have a result, you have to behave this way, and if you want to behave this way, you have to be this way. A bit like, you know, Mahatma Gandhi when he say, "Be the change you want to see in the world." So probably the number one skill work would be to work on the mindsets, on the mental models, on the beliefs. And saying that, it is true for individuals, for leaders, but it is also true for the organization. I don't know if there will be a question on that, but I think it's time for organizations to review their purpose, their mission, their vision, and their values, because they have to build a different future in most cases. But that's a different story. Oseas, I don't know if you want to react on this question.
When the first question hit, I was you know, thinking a lot of things, because I thought this because of how broad it is, there could be many answers. But I think the way you frame it helps me set it in place. So I would say, you know, there might be some skills that are probably no longer as relevant. So because we don't know which skills the person's talking about, and the question was, you know, which ones do we keep or do we need new ones? I'll say it depends on where you are. But I would say there's probably three buckets. You know, the old ones that might no longer be as relevant. Then there's the timeless ones, like you just mentioned, Thierry. You know, being able to control or focus on what you can control, and the mindset that corresponds to it. Being able to learn consistently. Those things have been with us for thousands of years, and I think are still as relevant or even more relevant today than they were before. And there's also new skills that we need to adapt, things that we didn't have before, like some of the ones you mentioned. There was another part of the question that had to do with context, and I think these are complementary. So we need to strengthen our timeless skills, so to speak. We need to work on the new ones. And in terms of context, that word, again, depending on how much precision we use it with, it can lead to an interesting line of exploration. I would just like to pull one of many that could come from that. There is a document that Netflix HR leaders released probably over a decade ago, and became kind of famous because it was written with such clarity that it was mind-blowing. And I remember one of the aspects that it said is like, look, we do not need to manage by rules, by telling people what to do. That's what you need to do when you don't have the right level of talent. And then you need to tell them everything to do, because otherwise you're going to make the bad decision. And if you're trying to manage that type of workforce, it's going to be very difficult. In a type of environment, for example, with knowledge workers, you would like people that are actually capable of making good decisions and allowing them to make decisions. Or as Steve Jobs would say, then they would otherwise not gonna want to work with you, right? So going back to the idea of context, the Netflix document says, when something doesn't work as expected, a good question to ask is, what context have we failed to set as leaders for people to make those choices that are better for the organization? So it's not what rule should I impose for this person to make the right choice because the rule forces them. It's how do I set the right context for the right decisions to be made? So I think those things go hand in hand very nicely.
I love it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So
then moving on now to our last question. So if anyone else has one to ask, type it now. One of our attendees has asked, one of our main global clients has just posted this statement. We have a unique opportunity to rethink and redesign the way we work. So this is common sense. How do you think this is actually going to happen?
That's a very good question. Let's be extremely pragmatic. If you are part of those organizations or those people where you have been doing in one day what we were doing in 1 week, in 1 week what we were doing in 1 month, and in 3 months, where we demonstrated that we can do things that we have never done, why don't you step back? Take the time to review what your people, I'm not talking about someone else, what your people, your organization has been doing and how. Try to understand what worked, what didn't work, and how it worked. And try to, and understanding that it was not in any kind of normal way, try to understand how you can make it in a new normal way. Of course, it was probably not sustainable, and it is probably not sustainable to continue this way, even if the outcome has been fantastic, because you're going to have burnout people, because it's a complete disorder, anarchy, etc. But this is probably the opportunity to review that. And maybe this anarchy you have seen, which is much more effective than the bureaucracy maybe that we had, is worth to investigate. And there are tools for that. Very concretely, you can use tools and processes. We are working with our friends from Human Synergistic with their COVID-19 culture mirror, where you look at, hey, what have we done during this crisis that worked or didn't work compared with before? So take the time to see that, take the time to learn from that, and then have a kind of an agile team with Oseas support to think, okay, how can we replicate that? But how can we replicate it in the sustainable way? And that's it. That's so pragmatic. And you will see, you will not change only the way you work. You will change your governance model. You will probably change your business model. You will change the way you think and the way you interact with people, which is the definition of what is an organizational culture. How do we think, or expected to think, act, and interact? I know that this is your field of expertise, Oseas, so I see you thinking, and so go ahead.
I was connecting a few thoughts. Thank you. When I listen to this type of questions, I always like to maybe frame them slightly different, which is like, you know, how do you think things are going to be if such a question were to be asked this way, right? I like to think about how can they be? So I like to think more about the possibilities versus what's going to happen. Well, probably if you don't do something deliberately about it, then something's going to happen. If you do something deliberately about it, what you plan is not going to happen exactly as you plan, but you have much greater influence on what the outcome is. So a couple of ideas come to mind. Just right before the lockdown started, the very last keynote that I did was with a group of a couple hundred executives, and we were talking about transformation, and they were, you know, figuring out their own digital and agile transformation. So I utilized an example that I think can help illustrate how to think about this to a certain extent, so that we can think about the future as something that we are designing to a great extent. So I was thinking, how do we tackle this question? Because you could tackle it very technically, right? Like, here's the process, the 5 stages of transformation, and here's your change model, and then you throw gazillion frameworks. And I think it's something that gives indigestion to executives at this point, or frameworks, because we have more of those than good ideas, actually. So I was trying to avoid the framework route and go to something more primal. And then I read an example of something that was interesting. Apparently, Elon Musk at some point was thinking about, Tesla as a business, and he was looking at the prices for batteries, the market prices. And turns out that if he bought the batteries on the market, the price of Teslas would be just exorbitant. So then he asked himself a different question. Instead of how do I get cheaper batteries, is why do we go to first principles? And first principles is a type of thinking, and you can trace back to Aristotle and even more, in which you just try to find really like the root of what you're looking at. So in this case, the way he applied his first principles was this idea, okay, what are batteries are made of? Well, nickel, cobalt, etc. What's the price of that on commodity market? Well, it's a lot less. Well, then why don't we build our own batteries? So just going back to this first principles thinking, he was able to find a very simple solution that otherwise, if you're just stuck in the frame of how do I make this thing cheaper, you don't have a lot of wiggle room. If your question is instead how do I get what I need to, not necessarily the market, then it allows you to think differently. So going back to transformation, I think there's a couple of, and this is how I framed in this keynote, there's two first principles of transformation, which are so obvious that I think gives us a very good starting point, and it's not a framework. So the first principle of transformation, I would say, is an organization cannot transform if its people do not transform. Sounds super obvious, right? Well, the point here is, sounds obvious, but it does not always happen. Usually when we talk about transformations, especially with leaders, they're thinking about the change that is going to be inflicted to others. How do my employees need to change? How do they need to develop their skills? How do we need to change our processes? But usually leaders see themselves as not going to be touched by these type of changes. So that, I guess, highlights that transformation starts with us. And the second is, if you want to transform, you should, again, sounds super simple, but we don't always have clarity around this. What do you want to transform it into? So if you don't have clarity of what the end state is, then where are you going? So those two very simple things, I think, provide good anchor points for a conversation. So that's one aspect. And then just to complement this, I think another way of thinking about, another approach to think about how to make the right changes, we could literally pull from some of the tools that we already have in the innovation space. And again, these are overutilized right now, and I think to a certain extent they lose virtue when you use them correctly. But you just look at the essence of design thinking. It says the first step is empathize. Care about the problem, feel it. And from that point of empathy, you can then define what the actual problem is. You have not solved it yet. You're just trying to define it correctly. A very good friend of mine has just released a book exactly on just defining the problem correctly. And then from there, you can go into, you ideate, you test stuff, and more importantly, you iterate. So I would say starting with empathy is very helpful. Defining the problems correctly you're trying to solve for is very helpful. Knowing where you want to go is very helpful. And finally, not least, from the Innovation Toolbox, one of the things that we insist more on is you will not be able to come up with a plan and execute it perfectly and everything's going to work. So stop trying. Instead, get better at iterating. Well, that didn't work. I'm going to try again and try again and try again and get good at going through that loop of iteration as quickly as possible so that you can learn more.
That's a very cool definition of innovation.
Yeah, really useful. Thank you. So we're almost at time now. I'm asking the very last question. Thank you everyone for asking questions. It's been a really interesting dive into these different areas. In a previous question, you were talking about context. And one of our attendees has asked what you mean by context. Do you mean internal, external, both? Do you mean around work relationships, personal context, team structures, or context in which the organization operates within the market?
Obviously, it's both. I mean, it's like consciousness. Consciousness is about understanding and seeing what is inside and outside. That's the obvious. And the outside is obvious. I mean, what is changing? I mean, we are talking about losing between 8 to 13% of our GDP. We are about, talking about 15 to 30 trillion dollars loss. This is what is in front of us. Okay, so there are better scenarios and there are worst case scenarios, but this is more or less it. And what is happening? Everything going to change in terms of the rules from the government, from the cities, from the citizens, different consumer behaviors, different behaviors from our employees, and so on and so forth. So obviously the context will be this one, and you need to really understand it, to be really extremely intimate, and to use this empathy Oseas was mentioning. And it's the same internally. And as I was saying, as we say here at the takeaway, start by managing your organization trauma. You will see that it will exist. You will see that you will have a big issue here. So be conscious of that. Oseas, I try to make you a short answer.
Thanks. I'll also try to be very brief. I know we're almost out of time. So yes, obviously, this question mentioned different types of context, and for example, the external context, there's little we can do about it, but it's good to understand what it is and then influence whatever we can. But in terms of the internal context of the organization, there's things that you can set from a leadership perspective that essentially generate this context for people to operate on. So whether it's the strategy, the clarity of your objectives, metrics, what are you measuring tells people what matters. Role definition, having clarity around how decisions are made. So it's like, is it made on the boss's whim, or are we voting on this? Or so all of those building blocks create a context in which people understand. The context in which I'm operating is one in which we're trying to achieve these objectives through this strategy. And we're going to be utilizing these methods. And this is how we're measuring whether we're doing this correctly or not. And here's what we actually hear from leaders versus what they actually do. So the interesting thing about context is, I guess, as a component of culture, is you will have one. You cannot not have one. So it's better to have one that you designed very consciously to be conducive of the best behaviors you want in an organization, versus having one just bubble up on its own and see whatever the hell it is. So I would say that specific area of internal context with the things that we can set and culture and take care and nurture and take care of is actually very critical.
And one last concept about the context is probably one of the objectives we are facing with this new normal or back to the future. We have one objective, all of us. I think it's to rebuild trust and self-confidence by reducing uncertainty and by giving probably some sense of meaning to who we are as an organization. But uncertainty is in the middle of all these contexts that we are facing today, and we need to reduce it and to rebuild trust and confidence.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both, Oseas and Thierry, for your discussion today around this and insights into what the new normal will be like. It's been really, really, really interesting. And thank you all for attending. We hope you enjoyed today's session. As I said before, we are going to share the recording in the next few days, and we look forward to seeing you at one of our next webinars. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning or afternoon.